if we could start, Mr. Blinken, with the North Korea sanctions and the administration of those sanctions, an issue I brought up in the opening statement. This is a strong North Korean sanctions bill that we passed, and this bill did help get that UN resolution in place. But you're just back from the region. What has been the reaction to this new law? How has the pressure been turned up? I raised that fact that no one has been sanctioned yet on human rights abuses. I think it's high time that happened. And I know there's a new UN report that points out that several countries are still purchasing North Korean weapons. If you would speak to that issue. European luxury goods are still making their way to Kim Jong-un. And are we yet to hit any Chinese banks facilitating transactions, as we did in the past with Banco Delta Asia, which was frankly very effective at the time? If you'll recall, it cut off the hard currency, stopped the production of the missile program at the time because they didn't have the hard currency to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank the committee for the very important work that it did. I think the combination of the UN Security Council resolution, which is the strongest tool we've had to deal with North Korea, the legislation from Congress, and the executive order that have put those into effect, really puts us in a different position. We now have the ability, if implemented, and that's the key, to maximize pressure on North Korea to try to get it to change its conduct. For the first time, through the UN Security Council resolution, we require that all cargo going in and out of the country be inspected. For the first time, we have sectoral sanctions that limit, or in some cases ban, the export of critical materials, coal, iron, gold, rare earth materials that are what they use to finance their activities. And we have financial sanctions that go at banks and assets. And we also have a ban on all dual-use nuclear and missile-related goods. The critical component now is implementation. And we're looking principally at China, as well as other countries, to follow through on implementation. China played an important role in getting the Security Council resolution. It is our expectation that it will now implement it. It's too soon to say whether that's the case. We've seen some encouraging developments, including regulations that it's promulgated, statements that it's made, but we're now watching intensely. But at the same time, it's not enough. And what we're focused on, besides the implementation of the Security Council resolution, is relentlessly building pressure on North Korea, working principally with our key allies, Japan and Korea. We're working in various ways to cut off all the revenues going to the regime. For example, they have, as you know, overseas workers whose remittances are not going back to their families but are going to the regime. We're working to cut those off. We have so-called diplomats engaged in illicit activities, procurement, but also even in illicit businesses. There were the restaurant workers who defected from China. We're seeing this in different countries around the world. They set up businesses, the money goes back to the regime. We're working relentlessly to find those places and to get countries to cut them off. We're working to further isolate North Korea by getting their diplomats who are, again, not engaged in diplomatic activities sent home. We're making sure that people don't go to North Korea, including for the Workers' Party Congress, or invite them to international events. And we're working as well to get countries to make sure that they're doing exactly what you alluded to, making sure that the ships that go to North Korea don't dock in their countries and that the planes don't land. So right now, we're working on enforcing all of that.
And I've been part of the dialogue our committee has on each of these fronts, and all have been helpful. But there is one final step that needs to be taken. Banks are concerned about the reputational risk of what will happen if they have to make a choice between doing business with North Korea or doing business with the United States. And we've seen in the past, for those dozen banks that were affected back during the sanctions regime put in place when North Korea was caught counterfeiting our $100 bills, just how concerned they are about reputational risk, even when those sanctions were reportedly listed by state. At the time, Banco Delta Asia still wanted to know, yes, but has the U.S. Treasury Department really signed off on this? Because otherwise, we're not going to move the hard currency into North Korea. Without that hard currency, They find it very difficult to move forward with their nuclear program and their missile programs. So it's essential that decision be made, and we're going to continue to dialogue on that. But that's a decision you need to make, and I'm sure you raised that in Beijing.
Appreciate that.
The last two, again, I'd raised that issue about the Rohingya people. We'll need to be working with that new government, frankly, in Burma to shape attitudes toward the Rohingya. And you're going to have to continue to lean in on that. On the Vietnam human rights issue, I've just got to share with you, we've got the case of a human rights lawyer, Nguyen Van Dai, who was arrested in December for his advocacy of human rights and advocacy of democracy. According to his wife, he was severely beaten by the police. He's been in solitary confinement since his arrest. He was denied access to his lawyers and to his family. Will the President push for his release? I think this is very, very necessary.
Mr. Chairman, I very much appreciate those comments. First, on the Rohingya, we have been very focused on working to get the government in Burma to protect their rights. When I was there most recently, a couple of months ago, I raised this repeatedly, including with Aung San Suu Kyi. We're looking to the government to give them genuine freedom of movement so that they can work, so that they can go to school, so they can get health care, and end the discrimination. We're working on that. With Vietnam, absolutely. I think the President will certainly engage with that community. When I was there last week, I met with civil society activists and lawyers and others, indeed to express the concern that we have. Vietnam's made real progress, as you know. They've released a lot of political prisoners. They're working to conform their laws to the Constitution, but work remains to be done.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Tony Blinken. I appreciate it. I will now go to our ranking member, Mr. Elliott Engel.